So I'm joined by Hastings Chikoko, who is the Regional Director for Africa for the C40 Climate Leadership Group. And Hastings, we were just talking about the importance of implementing the Paris Climate Agreement and the New Urban Agenda, which we're very interested in, as well as the Sustainable Development Goals. And I know in the session that you just took part in, the issue of how cities are going to work together to implement policy, to take the research and translate it into policy is really critical. Can you tell us a little more about your work and what are some of the big challenges that you face?
All right, thank you so much. So our work is basically focusing on climate change, but we actually are supporting cities globally on how they can implement various climate change activities. What is important to us is to really get this understanding that the climate change challenge requires collective attention. What that means is that the cities themselves first must work in collaboration. We don't have much time to waste in looking for solutions. If there is a city somewhere that has found a solution to a climate change problem, we should be able to connect them and be able to share the success stories, the best practices. So that's the first point that we really emphasize. But also we recognize that for us to achieve the agreements, whether it's Paris Agreement, whether it's the New Urban Agenda or the Sustainable Development Goal 11, which is focusing on cities, there has to be coordinated governance. So cities must begin to establish strong working relationships with provincial governments as well as national government. When the Paris Agreement was signed, we were very clear as C40 community, the mayors that went there, that national government cannot achieve the agreement alone without working with cities. And this is just because of the fact that 70% of the carbon emissions that we're talking about, they're coming from cities. And of course, also most of the urban areas, I think close to 90% of the urban areas are in the coastline, which means they will also be impacted a lot when it comes to the hazards from climate change, like sea level rise. So we can't afford to work in isolation. So we are emphasizing multi-level governance, supporting cities to be able to engage effectively with national government in addressing climate change.
Are there particular issues here in Africa that other parts of the world perhaps don't understand very well? I mean, I know we've been talking through the course of this conference, and one of the themes that's come out is that people, particularly from a European or American perspective, bring their European or American assumptions. Are there things about the African context that you think are especially important that we need to be recognizing?
Right, so thanks for that question. To me, yes, there are some issues that are unique to the Africa region, and of course there are some issues that are common. So to me, the first thing is the lack of credible data for planning or for monitoring. Most of the African cities, they're struggling to either access data where it is located or to actually really just find the data in some going to different sources. So this is very important in Africa for us to really focus on either data creation or data sharing, because we believe that some of the issues that we are dealing with need new knowledge. For example, we're talking about a new urban agenda. It's new. It's not about, because it's new, it's not putting new wine in old wine skins. We need also a new approaches, new insights, new infrastructure, new knowledge as well. So on the knowledge bit, we really need to focus on ensuring that there is collaboration between researchers, collaboration between academic institutions and the public sector, the city governments, as well as the national governments, to be able to harness adequate knowledge that can support the work that people are doing. The other challenge that we have in Africa is also the skills themselves, to really have qualified people working in cities and addressing these issues, as well as in national government. And that's one area we are also focusing on as C40, trying to really develop this skills of officials by facilitating learning. It could be just taking a city official to another city that has solved the problem and learn how they have done that, and bring back and contextualize it and learn. So skills development is key in Africa. Then, of course, there is the issue of infrastructure. Sometimes I feel like if we are able to just dig our cities, remove the soil and see what is down there in terms of water supply pipes, in terms of stormwater drainage, and in terms of even communication cables. It'll be amazing to see how some cities are relying on infrastructure that was even developed in the colonial era. The only reason that maybe we don't make noise about this is because we don't see it's buried under the ground. But of course, if the impacts are seen when you sometimes have taps that are running dry in a city for a week, because some pipe somewhere has developed a problem or that, or when you have power blackouts. So we need to really look at the issue of infrastructure in Africa. The African Development Bank just recently released the 2018 Africa Economic Outlook. And they have emphasized that Africa must invest a lot. I think they estimated, if I'm not mistaken, about $16 billion to just improve infrastructure, and that is key. Then, of course, I think I would do injustice to the region if I don't mention the issue of financing, because in different international platforms, like when you go to the climate change conversations, and I'm sure even the new urban agenda, there is a talk about where do we get the money to implement some of these things. For the climate change convention, this is even critical because Africa will be the worst affected region, meaning that we need more money to invest in infrastructure, as I've said, and other coping strategies. Where will that money come from? So we need to really be innovative in terms of financing mechanisms. There are some mechanisms that are there. We need to make them a little bit more accessible because also sometimes the processes are pretty daunting. And we also need to develop the ability or the capability within the African institutions to be able to package bankable projects. Because sometimes there is a willingness from the funders or the financiers to put money, and they ask maybe a city to say, okay, give us a proposal, but what you receive does not actually enable one to understand what is exactly the problem, what do they want to do. So we are supporting cities to actually be able to develop these bankable projects that can access the money that is there now. But evidently, we need to be thinking about new monies. And that may not be just coming from the multilateral arrangements that are there. We need to even look at new sources, and this will include collaboration with the private sector, for example. Can we really put those mechanisms that can make private sector a critical player in Africa's development? So those are some of the issues that I can put on the table.
So when you speak of finance, that seems to me incredibly important. And one of the themes that I hear about often is the need to value the externalities, the things like climate change and water depletion and things like that. How do you sort of bring those into the equation and find a way of generating a return on investment for those people who are trying to finance these projects and get a return. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are on what kinds of policies might be helpful. For example, policies to price depletion or to price greenhouse gas emissions or carbon, for example, or other mechanisms that might be helpful. Are you looking at those kinds of options, or the sort of return on investment for those who are coming in and financing those projects?
Yes, I think it is important to add value really to some of these. And in C40, for example, we work on quantifying the benefits of some of the interventions, climate change interventions. Right. And when we begin to reflect on those benefits, we don't just limit that thinking to just ecological benefits, but we have an initiative that is focusing on core benefits. Yes, it's a climate change intervention, but how does this contribute to the economy? How does this contribute to some social issues like reduction of crime or health? So you could actually say, fine, we are introducing, I'm just giving an example, a low emission bus. It could be running maybe on gas. Yes, that means that we reduce carbon emissions, fine. That's a good story from the ecological point of view. But we can also do some quantifying in terms of air quality and try to link that with the lung infections in the city, and be able to demonstrate to a policymaker to say, hey, if you invest in this clean transport, it's not just about greenhouse gas emissions, but your bill in terms of health will also be affected because you have a reduction on lung infection. We need to kind of think in that way. And this will also enable the investor to really find appetite in supporting these interventions. Right. Because if I put money in this, I'm getting this in return. I'm reducing carbon emissions, but I'm also creating jobs, so reducing employment. And I'm also, because I've removed some people from the streets, idle youth from the street, I'm also reducing crime. But this should not just be like statements that you are like hoping. We need to have figures. We need to be able to, this is where the question of data is important. You need to be able to quantify this. You need to be able to track this. Really, have you really reduced unemployment? Has this really resulted in reduction of crime? We need data on that. So to me, I support the approach of not being short-sighted, but to look at the whole big picture.
And those positive feedback returns are so important, and we're certainly seeing that in our work, particularly on public space. We're focused on that issue. But it's the same issue with climate change. There are many different benefits of health and ecological benefits and reduction of crime. And somehow we've got to find the way to track those positive returns on investment. And then we've got to share that knowledge somehow. And it seems to me that's what you at C40 and ICLEI and the other peer-to-peer organizations are really working to do. And I understand you work quite a bit with ICLEI and others.
Yes, I mean, sometimes we also don't want to just duplicate effort. Yeah. So we're in a situation where there is a lot that needs to be done to address climate change. There is a lot that needs to be done to achieve the aspirations in the new urban agenda. Right. So we can't afford to just duplicating effort. It's better to use the resources that are available efficiently by working together. Right. So in C40, we do work with partners, like you've mentioned ICLEI, there is Cities Alliance, trying to understand what is it that you are taking to the cities, which areas are you covering, and where are the gaps, and so that we can actually supplement or complement that. And this has also been good for the cities themselves, because sometimes they also get, there's fatigue in trying to deal with this one on the same thing, and then another international partner comes and another one comes. So we really are working with partners on that. And most importantly is what you have said, that when you have done something, when you have done the quantifying, you need to share this information. So there is also that sharing of information, not just between the partners, but between the cities themselves. In C40, we believe that the best advice a city can get is from another city that has solved that problem. So yes, when there is a hurrah moment, I found a solution, share it widely, and we facilitate that.
That's terrific. And I think part of the issue right now for the New Urban Agenda and the Paris Climate Agreement and the Sustainable Development Goals is how to leverage these networks of implementation, research into action, and so on, and not duplicate too much, but at the same time create leverage that clearly UN Habitat, for example, can't do everything and shouldn't do everything. It's going to have to build a network of implementers, and I think that's something we'll be looking at the World Urban Forum occurring next week. How do we build those networks? So do you have any thoughts about that, sort of final thoughts about where we're going to go from here? What are the big issues we have to really work on now?
Okay, I think to me that the big issues, we have a number of instruments out there that are providing vision, providing framework for addressing different issues. We have, I mean, right now, you know, I should say this. Right now, we have really tremendous opportunity for coordination and cooperation. Because at the global level, we have some key instruments, some key frameworks that are providing vision. For the first time, we have a goal, a global goal, that is focusing on cities, Sustainable Development Goal number 11. We never had that before. Of course, it's understandable that we have this because of the urbanization and the population that will be living in the urban areas very soon. So, but that's an opportunity. Well, then we have the New Urban Agenda. Then we have Paris Agreement. These are providing clear frameworks and vision in terms of what needs to be done in the world. And we should actually build on that to use these instruments as also instruments of coordination amongst ourselves. So the big thing for me is, I would use the word domesticating the international frameworks, bring them at national level, translate them into national policies, and use the policies that are aligned to Paris Agreement, New Urban Agenda, and Sustainable Development Goal number 11 as a guiding framework at national level and at local level to coordinate both the activities that we are doing and the financing of those activities. So regardless of the source of finance, we need to have a kind of like a coordinating mechanisms that, okay, this is how the national budget, this is how we're going to allocate, and whatever we seek from outside, we direct to this, because these are the priority coordinated areas that we have identified. So there is that opportunity. But how to translate from global to local, that's where the big thing is, and that's what we should focus on.
Well, it does seem like a historic moment, doesn't it, with 193 countries adopted the New Urban Agenda by acclamation, and we do have these wonderful frameworks. So Hastings Chikoko, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Much appreciated.